My ex-wife secretly took out life insurance on me. She'd make my food taste strange and I'd wake up dizzy. Doctors said it was stress. But when I installed a hidden camera, I saw her mixing powder into my coffee. Today, she's in jail facing charges of attempted murder. My name is Jordan. I'm 34, a project manager, and for the past 3 years, I thought I was happily married to my dream woman. Or maybe I was just blind. I remember the first time I noticed something was off. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the shower and I started feeling this sharp pain right behind my eyes. Like knives. I stumbled, grabbed the sink. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the water. I told myself I was just tired. I'd been working late. That's what anyone would think, right? My wife, Melissa, was downstairs making breakfast. When I came down, she smiled that sweet smile that used to melt me. She handed me a steaming mug of coffee. I took a sip. It tasted different. Bitter. Chalky. I asked if we'd switched brands. She laughed, said she added a new protein powder for my health. She told me to trust her. That she was just trying to take care of me. I wanted to believe her. But that day I felt worse than ever. Dizzy. Nauseous. I almost collapsed in the elevator at work. My coworkers joked that I needed a vacation. Or a new liver. I forced a laugh, but I was scared. Because this wasn't normal. That night, Melissa insisted on cooking dinner. She poured me a glass of wine. I took one bite of the pasta she made, and the same bitterness coated my tongue. I watched her face. She looked so eager. Like she was waiting for me to swallow. I forced it down, my stomach churning. By bedtime I was sweating through the sheets. Melissa pressed a cold cloth to my forehead. She murmured how worried she was. That I should see a doctor. Over the next week I did. I went to 3 blood tests, scans. They found nothing. Stress, they said. Anxiety. Maybe depression. Maybe I was working too hard. They prescribed sleep meds. Melissa looked relieved every time a doctor confirmed it was all in my head. I started doubting myself. Maybe I really was going crazy. Until the night I woke up at 2 a.m. and found her at my side of the bed. She was holding a little Ziploc bag half open. A white powder inside. When I stirred, she jumped back, the sweetest smile snapping onto her face like a mask. Said she was just checking if I was okay. That night I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to her breathing, wondering what I'd just seen. Wondering if I'd imagined it. 2 days later I called my best friend Chris. He's always been blunt. I told him everything. The bitter coffee. The dizzy spells. The doctors. The powder. He got quiet. He asked if I'd checked if Melissa had any life insurance on me. I laughed it off at first. But the way he said it stuck with me like a splinter. The next morning, while Melissa was at yoga, I dug through the filing cabinet in her home office. It was locked. She'd never locked it before. I felt like a criminal as I picked the lock with a butter knife. My hands were shaking. Inside were folders of bank statements, credit card bills. And then near the back, a thin blue folder labeled policy. I opened it. My name. $1 million policy. Taken out 8 months ago. Beneficiary, Melissa. My blood ran cold. I sat on the floor of her office, papers spread around me like a storm. I tried to remember if she'd ever mentioned insurance. She hadn't. I felt sick. I knew what this looked like. But my brain refused to accept it. That night I tried to act normal. I kissed her cheek. Ate the dinner she made. Pretended I was tired and went to bed early. My mind was spinning. I knew I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that could tell me I wasn't insane. Or if I was, prove it once and for all. The next day I bought a tiny camera. One of those pinhole things you can hide in a smoke detector. I installed it in the kitchen, right above the coffee maker. I felt like a spy. Like a man in a thriller. Except this was my life. Over the next 3 mornings I woke up early, pretended to shower, and watched the footage from my phone in the car outside the house. The first 2 days, nothing. She poured coffee. Stirred in milk. Nothing unusual. I started to question myself all over again. But on the 3rd morning my stomach dropped as I watched her. She took the same Ziploc bag I'd seen by my bed. Opened it. Tapped white powder into my mug. Stirred it carefully, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. Then she smiled to herself. Like she was proud. I watched it 3 times. My hands were ice. My breath shallow. There was no more denying it. She was poisoning me. I called Chris again. He told me to get out. Right then. But I was shaking so badly I couldn't even start the car. I just sat there, staring at the house, at the woman I married moving around in the kitchen like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't slowly killing me. That evening I went inside and tried to act normal. But every time she touched me I flinched. Every time she smiled, I felt bile rise in my throat. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. Locked the door. Texted Chris to call the police. I needed backup. Proof. Help. Because I didn't know what she'd do if she realized I knew. While I waited, I searched online for what the powder could be. Rat poison? Cyanide? There were so many options it made my head spin. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. 20 minutes later, I heard the knock. The police were there. I met them at the door. Melissa came up behind me asking what was happening, her voice sweet, confused. One of the officers pulled me aside. I showed him the footage on my phone. He went pale. They arrested her right there in our living room. She was still wearing her pink apron, spatula in hand. She screamed that I was lying. That I was framing her. That I was the one who needed help. They put her in cuffs and led her outside. Our neighbors gathered on their lawns, whispering. In the kitchen, I sat down at the table and cried. The officers asked me questions. Took the bag of powder as evidence. I handed over the blue insurance folder. They told me I'd done the right thing. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like my life had exploded. The next day I was alone in the house. The silence was deafening. I kept expecting her to walk in. To laugh. To tell me it was all a joke. But it wasn't. The kitchen still smelled like her perfume. The bed still had her imprint. Later that afternoon, Detective Alvarez called. They'd tested the powder. It was a cocktail of sedatives and anticoagulants. Enough to kill me slowly. Make it look like a heart attack or a stroke. He told me I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. I felt shattered. The day after Melissa's arrest felt like the longest day of my life. I walked through the house in a daze. Her coffee mug was still in the sink. A half-written grocery list on the fridge. Her coat hanging by the door. Ghosts of our life together were everywhere. Detective Alvarez called again that evening. He said Melissa wasn't talking. Just kept repeating that I was making everything up. That I was mentally unstable. He told me not to contact her. Not to talk to her family. They were already calling the station, screaming about how she could never do something like this. But part of me wanted to hear her voice. I wanted her to explain. Tell me it was a mistake. That there was some reason for the powder, the insurance. I wanted it so badly it hurt. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until 4 a.m., scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of us at the beach. On camping trips. Her laughing as I tried to pitch a tent in the rain. Her head on my shoulder, eyes closed, peaceful. I kept thinking, how could someone who looked at me like that want me dead? Around dawn I heard a noise outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw a dark SUV parked across the street. Engine running. I couldn't make out who was inside. But it didn't feel right. I texted Chris. He said it might be one of her relatives trying to intimidate me. He told me to stay inside, lock the doors. The next morning, Detective Alvarez called again. They checked Melissa's internet history. Searches for how to poison without taste, how to induce heart attack, rat poison symptoms, and worst of all, life insurance payout timeline. He said it was enough to build a strong case, but they needed me to testify. The thought of sitting in court facing her made me want to throw up. But I knew I had to do it. I went to stay with Chris for a few days. I couldn't stand the silence of the house. Or the smell of her perfume still lingering on the sheets. Chris made me sleep on his couch. We stayed up late, him trying to distract me with stupid movies. But every time I closed my eyes I saw her face. Her smile as she stirred my coffee. 3 days later I went back to the house with Chris. I needed clothes, my laptop, my documents. Walking through the front door felt like stepping into a nightmare. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. The kitchen table still had the mug I dropped when the police came. A tiny brown stain on the floor where the coffee had splashed. As we packed, Chris stopped in the living room holding a piece of mail. He looked pale. He handed it to me. It was a letter from the insurance company. Dated a week before Melissa's arrest. It confirmed a recent change to the policy, doubling the payout if I died accidentally. I sank to the floor. My ears rang. Chris grabbed my shoulders telling me to breathe. But I couldn't. The walls felt like they were closing in. Later that night, Detective Alvarez called again. They'd found more evidence. Melissa had contacted a private investigator 6 months ago, asking about my daily schedule, routes to work, places I liked to run. She told him it was for a surprise anniversary gift. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? She was charming. Convincing. Deadly. That night, back at Chris's, I started having nightmares. I'd wake up gasping, sure she was in the room. Standing over me with that Ziploc bag. Smiling. Every creak in the house made me jump. I started sleeping with a knife on the nightstand. Chris tried to talk me into therapy. I knew he was right, but I wasn't ready. I couldn't trust anyone. Not after trusting her. A week later, I got a subpoena to testify at the pretrial hearing. I felt sick reading it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the paper. I kept seeing her face in my mind. The way she looked at me while the police took her away. Like I'd betrayed her. Like I was the monster. The morning of the hearing, I sat in the courthouse parking lot for an hour trying not to vomit. I finally went inside feeling like my legs were made of rubber. The courtroom was cold. Sterile. I sat at the witness table. Melissa walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back. She looked right at me. Her eyes were dead. Flat. No warmth. No remorse. When I started testifying, my voice was shaky. I told them everything. The bitter coffee. The dizziness. The powder. The hidden camera. The life insurance policy. I could feel her eyes boring into me the whole time. Like knives. Her lawyer kept objecting. Saying I was exaggerating. That I'd misinterpreted everything. That it was all circumstantial. But then the prosecution played the footage from my hidden camera. The entire courtroom went silent. The video showed Melissa tapping the powder into my coffee, her face lit by the kitchen light, calm and deliberate. That silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The judge ruled to move forward with the case. Melissa was denied bail. She stared at me as the deputies led her away. Her face twisted in a mask of rage I'd never seen before. After the hearing, I went outside and threw up in the bushes. Chris was waiting by my car. He hugged me, told me I'd done the right thing. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like the woman I loved had died, and in her place was someone I never really knew. Over the next week, things got worse. Melissa's sister started calling me, leaving furious voicemails. Telling me I was destroying their family. That Melissa loved me. That I was mentally unstable. She showed up at my work once, screaming in the parking lot until security escorted her off the premises. I started checking over my shoulder everywhere I went. I felt like prey. Like I was always one step from being ambushed. Detective Alvarez assigned a patrol car to drive by my house a few times a day. He told me it was a precaution. But it didn't make me feel safer. It just reminded me how close I'd come to dying. How close I still felt to danger. One night, I was watching TV at Chris's place when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was Melissa. I almost dropped the phone. She'd called from jail. She told me she forgave me. That she understood why I did what I did. That she still loved me and she'd always loved me. Her voice was soft, almost hypnotic. I hung up and blocked the number, my hands shaking so badly I spilled water all over the couch. Detective Alvarez called the next day. He apologized. Said he had no idea she'd be allowed to call me. He promised it wouldn't happen again. But it was too late. Her voice was in my head, whispering. Her laugh. Her sweet, careful words. 3 days later, Chris woke me up in the middle of the night. He'd heard glass breaking downstairs. We crept down together, kitchen knives in hand. The back window was shattered. The house was empty. But someone had left a note taped to the fridge. You will pay. I gave the note to the police. They dusted for prints. Nothing. They told me to consider moving somewhere safe. Somewhere Melissa's family couldn't find me. I felt like my life had turned into a horror movie I couldn't escape. The morning after the break-in, I packed my bags. Chris helped me load everything into his truck. We drove 2 hours out of town to a small Airbnb near the lake. I needed to breathe. Needed to sleep without jumping at every creak. As we pulled out of my neighborhood, I watched my house shrink in the rearview mirror. It felt like I was leaving a crime scene. Because I was. The lake house was quiet. Peaceful. The air smelled like pine. But inside I was still a mess. Every time the wind rattled the windows, I'd startle. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of panic. Detective Alvarez called 2 days later. He said they'd identified fingerprints on the note left in Chris's kitchen, Melissa's brother. He'd been arrested and charged with intimidation. Alvarez told me he believed the worst was over. That Melissa's family had made their move, and now the police were watching them closely. It didn't help. Not really. Because my nightmares had already moved in. Every night, I dreamed of Melissa standing at the foot of my bed. Sometimes smiling. Sometimes holding a knife. I'd wake up soaked in sweat, heart hammering, certain I'd hear her footsteps in the hall. One afternoon, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. The trial date was set for 3 months from now. They said they'd need me to testify in full. That it was critical I show the jury how Melissa had manipulated me. How she'd convinced everyone I was the crazy one. In the weeks that followed, I spent hours meeting with the prosecutor. Recounting every detail. watching the video of Melissa poisoning my coffee over and over, until the footage felt like a scene from a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Each time, the sick, stunned feeling in my chest never got easier. I couldn't go back to work. I was on unpaid leave, living off my savings. Chris offered to help with rent, but I couldn't accept. I felt like a failure, like a ghost of the person I'd been. Then one morning my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was the insurance company. They'd been notified of the investigation. They told me they'd frozen the policy. They wanted a recorded statement from me about my understanding of the policy and why it was taken out. I could barely get the words out. I felt like I was testifying all over again. As the trial drew closer, I tried to find moments of peace. I'd walk by the lake, let the wind wash over me, breathe. Some days I'd feel almost normal. Then I'd catch a whiff of coffee or see a couple holding hands, and it would slam me back into that kitchen. The mug. The powder. The way she looked at me, loving and lethal. The first day of the trial was surreal. The courtroom was packed. Melissa looked calm, almost regal in her prison uniform. Her family sat behind her, glaring at me like I was the villain. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my notes. When I took the stand, the defense tried to rip me apart. They asked if I'd been drinking, if I'd ever taken drugs, if I'd had mental health issues. They tried to paint me as unstable, paranoid, desperate for attention. But every time they asked, I answered calmly, clearly, because I knew the truth. And the video footage didn't lie. The prosecutor showed the footage again. The courtroom went silent. I heard a few gasps. Melissa looked down at the table, stone-faced. But I saw her jaw clench, her eyes flick up to mine just once, full of cold hatred. Then the prosecutor presented the searches from her laptop. The insurance policy. The calls to the private investigator. Piece by piece they laid out how she'd planned it. How careful she'd been. How close she'd come to succeeding. By the end of the week I felt hollow. Like I'd given every piece of myself to the courtroom. I'd wake up with headaches. My stomach was in knots. But I kept going. Because the alternative was letting her win. On the fourth day Melissa took the stand. She told the jury I'd been abusive. That I'd threatened her life. That she'd only taken out the insurance because she was afraid of what I'd do to her. Her voice was soft, cracking with tears at all the right moments. But the prosecutor shredded her story, question by question. She had no police reports. No photos of injuries. No texts or calls complaining about me to friends or family. Her narrative fell apart like wet tissue. When closing arguments finished, the jury deliberated for 2 days. 48 hours of pacing, sleepless nights, endless cups of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. Then the call came, they had a verdict. I sat in the courtroom, every nerve on fire as the judge read the decision. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, poisoning, insurance fraud. Melissa didn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead, blank and pale. Her mother started sobbing. Her sister wailed. I didn't feel joy. Or relief. Just an aching emptiness. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison. As they led her away, she finally looked at me. Her eyes were like ice. Then she was gone. After the verdict, people told me I should celebrate. That I'd survived. That justice had been served. But all I could think about was how close I'd come to dying at the hands of someone I loved. Someone I'd trusted with my life. I moved out of state a month later. Sold the house. Left my job. Started over. Therapy helped, slowly. Chris stayed in touch every day, even visited when he could. I found a small apartment in a quiet town by the ocean. The air there felt clean. Healing. But some nights I still wake up gasping, sure I hear her voice. Sure she's there in the shadows. I check every lock twice before bed. I don't know if that will ever change. What I've learned is this: love can blind you. It can make you ignore the taste of poison in your coffee. The dizziness that won't go away. The partner who smiles too sweetly. I learned that survival isn't about being fearless. It's about seeing the truth no matter how much it breaks you. And choosing to fight anyway. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone like that again. But I'm alive. I get to watch the sun rise over the ocean. I get to breathe. And for now that's enough. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more jaw-dropping true stories and ex-confessions. I share real, messy, and emotional stories every day, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Click the bell so you never miss an update. Let's navigate these crazy twists and turns.